This week on the Wheelhouse, young people and their engagement in politics and in civil discourse. For Connecticut Public, I'm Frankie Graziano. This is the Wheelhouse. It's the show that brings politics to the people. We got your weekly dose of politics in Connecticut and beyond right here. And this hour, we're continuing our series speaking with college students about civic engagement. The school year is winding down, as I'm told, and so are opportunities to engage in political debate in one of college's most important forums, the classroom. Later, we're going to hear two Connecticut professors chime in on how they're fostering an environment that encourages healthy debate. But first, we're going to hear from the students. That's the most important thing. Let's do that. Merci Payadue is an international studies and politics and government student at the University of Hartford. Merci, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So pumped to have you on and talk to you. And you can see to her left, as it were, or excuse me, to her right. I can't even think anymore. That's Farah. Farah Suede is a sociology and politics and government student at the University of Hartford. Farah, thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. We're going to have a nice conversation. Are you a Gen Z student who is politically active? Let us know. Let us know why. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, 888-720-9677. You could also leave a comment on our live stream on YouTube. What does free speech and political engagement on a college campus, that's going to be our first question, look like to you? Go ahead, Merci.
Oh. I guess it's knowing that you have the ability you have power and your voice holds influence on your campus, and knowing that you can express your opinions or beliefs, albeit supported by evidence, and not fear ostracization from your peers or from people higher up.
How long have you had a voice on campus for? Just some quick background into some of the leadership that you've had on campus.
Yeah. So past 3 years, actually, this is one of my first years not a member of student government on campus. Last year, I was chair of PR for the Student Government Association. I've been a student ambassador for 4 years now for the College of Arts and Sciences. I was an intern with the Governor Jody M. Rao Center on campus as well.
Quite the resume.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a founding member of a campus activism group called Activate UHeart on campus. And I think that's it.
Farah, what about you? Tell me about your resume a little bit here.
All right.
Your leadership resume.
I'm in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Last year, I served as student body president, and then the year before that, I was student body vice president, and then the year before that, I spent half a term as student body vice president.
Outside of that, since sophomore year, pretty much. You've been a leader, yeah.
I've been involved actually since freshman year. I took over freshman year, and I stayed on. This year, I'm taking the chance to invest in myself and take that time. And then over the past few years, I've been involved with campus committees, talking to administration, talking to leaders, faculty senate about the concerns of students. So those are my big ticket items on campus.
Through that lens, help me out with free speech and political engagement on a college campus, and what's it like for you? What does it mean to you?
I think universities are a unique environment because they're kind of like a smaller world that you're jumping into before you jump into the big pond. And I think university free speech, what matters most is not just the conversations that are allowed to happen in the classroom, but the conversations that are happening on the campus community as a whole. And not just what the university is saying itself, but what they're platforming and what messages that they're championing. I think that's most important. And I think college campuses are the time to test out what you think, how you think it, and how to express it. And I think that environment is so unique. You won't find that anywhere else.
I think building off of Farah's point, it's not just what is being said, but what's not being said and what conversations aren't being had on campus. I think by reading between the lines a lot, you can see not just certain political ideologies on college campuses, but also why there are certain things not being said or what fears may surround conversations that are not being held even beyond just a classroom setting, even in just like interpersonal conversations.
Sounds like you're trying to have those nuanced conversations. I appreciate that very much. The Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement found in 2023 that 40% of young people feel well informed enough to participate in politics. How do you find your age group is doing in terms of keeping up with the politics?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, Farah, go
I
ahead.
think it depends on who you're talking to. We kind of live in a microcosm where our classes are students who are passionate about politics and political discourse. And so the peers that I'm seeing every day are students that listen to the radio, students that read articles and are well informed. So I think it depends on what you're invested into. But I do think that social media plays a good role. I think the older generation slates social media and how it connects to the news. But I do think it's powerful to every day be able to get small doses of information. And I don't think it's the be all end all for your information or your news. It never should be. But I think there's a strength there that young people get to rely on, and we get to kind of have the world at our fingertips, as people say. And I think that's important. And I wouldn't disagree. I think my peers are well informed. I think there is better work to be done, but I don't think it's our generation that is a bigger issue.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I like the social media point. I think it's very important for us to have that access. Like, yes, algorithms can filter and create echo chambers of what you are seeing. But in a world where news media now is set behind paywalls, it's important to have even tiny bits of access of information that you don't necessarily have to pay for each time. Again, I think our generation is considering everything going on relatively informed. There's obviously a lot of work that can be done to make sure that, especially on like a local setting, local and municipal politics, there's a lot more of an information gap there.
Access is such an important word because people might not understand this because it's 2026 and it's like, wow, this can't be happening. Some people don't have the internet still. It's very key and important to talk about broadband access and just regular access. I know you're talking more about the regular part of it, but it just made me think about that. Not everybody has access, so it's good to talk about that. I got to ask you guys, the 2024 presidential election, maybe even 26 now with midterms, is there some local stuff? Anything recently play a role in your interest in politics? And if so, could you help us out?
Yeah.
I think you guys would have been sophomores during the 2024 presidential election.
We were juniors. We
Yes.
were both interning at the Governor Jody Emrell Center for Public Service.
Yes, 'cause a year and a half ago.
Yeah, we had the chance to organize watch parties, debate watch parties, and voter registration drives through the Rell Center.
And election night watch parties.
Yeah. I think the election time is an interesting time because, especially at the Connecticut level, you have students coming from all over the country. You know, the majority of UHart students are New York, New Jersey, and the tri-state area. And the small percentage that are Connecticut voters, it's that trying to engage them into what's going on in Connecticut, I think is really important. For me, what interested me the most was, you know, the overturn of Roe v. Wade, the overturn of affirmative action through Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard and UNC, those bigger ticket items of kind of how the, like, not only the political landscape, but just landscape as a whole in the states was changing. That was the biggest thing that interested me over the election. And my worries over what was going on, not only at home, but also abroad and what we were contributing to, those are my bigger worries.
Yeah, I totally, to echo Farah's point, I think as an out-of-state student, it's definitely an interesting opportunity to be here to hear about local Connecticut politics and not really necessarily be a person who's directly contributing through like voting access. But again, communicating with my peers, making sure that they have all the information available. And I think for out-of-state students, there's an interesting realm where, with the attacks on mail-in ballots, the challenge that presents to them when it comes to being civically engaged in their home communities, their local communities. And I'm from New York City, and surprisingly, New York City, the way that local elections, the information available there, it's lacking. It's often lacking. It's very difficult to get up-to-date information on who's running and the platforms that they hold. And doing that from home, so doing that from out of state, it can be even more difficult. So I think all things considered, we're okay. We're hanging in there. But to the point of that, the previous election, the presidential election, similar to Farah, the overturn of Roe v. Wade was a very large concern for me, but also just the rising authoritarian sentiment internationally, far-right fascism rising internationally was a really big concern for me. And I think in that point, I was just kind of interested in trying to see what we could do to slow that spread.
that sounds like you care very much about whether or not you trust the government to either, I guess, rule or, excuse me, lead the people or sort of lead with an iron fist. So how does trust or distrust in institutions shape participation for you?
I can definitely take that. I think in our generation, someone mentioned earlier today when we first got here and said that we were politics students, that they were surprised that we weren't jaded or didn't approach politics with a kind of nihilistic sense. And although we might not feel that way, I feel a larger sentiment in our generation is kind of like, my vote doesn't really count, or what I do doesn't really count going through the system. And albeit there are instances where I too feel that way, I find that especially after seeing the, I'm totally forgetting what case this was, Citizens United.
Yeah.
And the presidential immunity Supreme Court case a couple years ago, it kind of feeds into that sentiment of people feeling like there really isn't nothing that we can do. There is no trust in our government. Do we really live in a democracy? And kind of conversations around that. And it kind of leads to a concern, especially around our generation, about kind of feeling hands-offish when it comes to elections, specifically smaller elections, or even in large presidential elections of not really participating through voting and more so other means.
Farah,
Yeah.
do you think there's some inorganic element to that where like somebody really wants you to not pay attention? They really want you to be disengaged, so maybe that becomes a narrative?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting when we level critiques at our generation about a lack of engagement, because my question is, what's our buy-in to participating in the political system? Largely for our lives, the system has struggled to make strides in the issues that are affecting us, whether that's in regulations for firearms, big strides for climate change, or strides in terms of healthcare costs, education costs. And we're graduating now into a job market that's struggling, and into a reality where the federal administration can determine, left and right whether degrees are considered professional, and they can change the rules on federal grants. So I think it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to critique the younger generation for not being involved when this is the struggle that we're dealing with. Some people are struggling to fill their tank of gas and buy groceries. We can't ask them on top of that to be overly involved and to commit themselves to something extra. Being involved, being civically engaged, it's a luxury, and it's a luxury that's not afforded to many.
It's so fascinating, and I'm going to move on because we don't have a ton of time today, but I talk to so many students, and their big concern every time I talk to them about their generation, what's marking your generation? They're like, it's firearm drills in class, being a kid and having to do a shooting drill.
Yeah.
And I can imagine when you're saying, what's the buy-in, when it's like, I'm doing all these scary drills in school when I'm a little kid. And then is anybody actually doing anything about it? So I could see the frustration there. But let me move on to say that over the last couple of years, nearly 150 universities, including Yale, have adopted policies of institutional neutrality. That means they're staying quiet on hot-button issues as political pressure rises against higher ed nationwide. What's your reaction to it?
Ooh, I mean, UHART as well adopted institutional neutrality last year. And I think universities and colleges over the last few years came to face the reality that is trying to advance productive dialogue among students and also balance interests as a private institution. I think UHART isn't unique in that. Neither are the other schools in Connecticut, whether that's Yale or the state schools such as UConn that adopted institutional neutrality. I think the bigger fear is around how partisanship can affect their popularity, can affect their money. I think those are the bigger ticket items. And as institutions, their interest is in protecting their well-being and the institutional well-being. And so the struggle for students is that sometimes our interests go against that. And as a result, there's no room for our voices when we're calling into question policies that aren't beneficial towards us. And I think colleges as a whole are kind of coming to a reckoning of what comes next.
Yeah, I guess looking at higher educational institutions, balancing institutional neutrality with the progression of knowledge and information and research, I should say. I think of the trans debate and how being neutral in one sense may be going against what the hard science says, what the research says. And I think in that sense, it doesn't call into question, but I think it kind of challenges what your role is as an educational institution. Like Farah said, juggling that with being a private institution, having to maintain finances, having to maintain a budget line, kind of plays into that as well. And I think with concerns of retaliation from the federal government, there's a lot of drive to be as uncomplicated as possible on certain situations, maintaining some kind of neutrality so that you don't have to fear, like Columbia, fearing kind of retaliation and having funds pulled and having your international students threatened, and that kind of fear that comes with that.
And it's not just necessarily money or that institution doing that. It's other institutions as well, because even with political power, staying on message and focus on sort of globalist issues or populist issues, populist issues may be better for your bottom line than focusing on what we call culture issues. And that can do more harm. And universities, you say it kind of goes against what the students want. So it can end up doing more harm, I would imagine, than good. In terms of shaping policy, would you all tell me what you think? Actually, I want to ask you about this. For its part, the advocates of institutional neutrality believe that colleges or universities take a stance on issues. It can also quell dissent. So how do you react to that? Are you guys being quiet as a result, or are you having issues with them wanting to do that? Are you seeing that maybe your school or other schools are trying to quell dissent?
I think sorry.
On paper, I think institutional neutrality can have its merits on the surface. Kind of this idea that, we won't comment on anything so we can foster growth and learning and dialogue on everything. But in practice, that's not what institutional neutrality does. In practice, things that are considered not political those are the interests that the university wants to advance. And so they'll choose to comment on certain things and deem them as not political, deem them as safe topics to discuss. And then interests that they're not interested in are deemed as political and deemed as things that they can't comment on. So I find that interesting that we're, proponents of institutional neutrality are saying that it offers room for more dialogue, when in reality it sets the stage for who gets to say is safe dialogue, who gets to define productive dialogue.
I think you could also say the same, what proponents of institutional neutrality are saying the same thing about institutional neutrality. Having an institution that is not taking any kind of platform or any kind of opinion at all. For students who have an opinion that may be seen as, like Farah said, controversial or against the norm or subversive, they may feel targeted or may feel unsupported by their institutions, and thus pull themselves away from dialogue or discourse that may be seen as, like Farah said, deemed political and unsafe to discuss.
You've been listening to Merci Payadue and Farah Suede, students at the University of Hartford. They're going to stick with us after this break. We're going to continue our discussion on political discourse and what we can do to create a safe environment for disagreement on and off campus. You're listening to The Wheelhouse. Give us a call if you want to talk, 888-720-9677, and stay tuned after these words. This is the Wheelhouse from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Frankie Graziano. This hour, we're talking about engagement in civics and political discourse with two college students. And what a time to do it. It's the end of the year. Graduation is coming up fast for our two guests specifically.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I think you guys are going to do it. I'm very confident in you. Merci Payadue is an international student studies and politics and government student at the University of Hartford. I'm about to have my morning burp. I apologize. Merci, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Farah Suede is a sociology and politics and government student at the University of Hartford. Thank you so much for coming on here. I want to say, what do you see youngsters are doing to make a difference? We hope you'll join the conversation. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, 888-720-9677. Long academic year. Since the fall semester started, here are some of the things we've seen. The assassination of conservative podcaster Charlie Kirk, the election of a socialist mayor in New York City, Zohran Mamdani. You got U.S. airstrikes in Iran. How have any of these events, if you could point to one in particular, kind of shaped the discourse at UHart?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting time to be a university student because you walk into class and especially in our majors, and the professors are ready to throw out curriculum and have those current conversations. It's tough to focus on the nitty-gritty and political theory when there's so much going on in the world. And to add in a few headlines, everything that happened with President Maduro out of Venezuela, and everything that's going on in the world, honestly, there's new headlines every day. And so we're playing that game of what to discuss and what's important and where to put our energy, especially as we're winding down on our capstones and our 20-page papers at the end of the semester. I think overall, my time at university, we've had some really hot-button issues come up. And I think the struggle with those bigger issues is that it's hard to wade through them and to determine which one determines your attention and where you should be kind of pointing your priorities. I think those bigger ticket items that are happening out of the Middle East, for me personally, a few years ago, everything that went on and is still going on in Gaza was a really big focus for me and a big struggle for me to focus on class when things were going on around the world. It's tough to focus on the curriculum when it feels like people back home are facing things that I'll never face and I'll never be able to experience, and it's a tough thing to swallow.
And institutions may not want you to talk about it too.
Absolutely.
So how can you explore what you're going through? Okay.
Yeah.
I think for us, especially as politics students, having conversations about traditionally what happens, about what systems are in place and what is the norm, and then coming into class that morning with a headline that just completely erases all of that, erases everything that was what it was, and having to approach this brand new kind of world that we're living in and looking to your professors for help. But this is also the first time that this has ever happened for them as well. And kind of embracing that together and going through this together and trying to navigate that is definitely something I wasn't expecting coming into university.
This is something I deeply appreciate about Gen Z, because I think you, better than any generation, is like, no, this is not normal.
Yeah.
Whereas we're always like, I don't know, maybe other kids will do this as millennials, but I'm always like, is this normal? And I'm asking somebody that's older than me, and they're like, yeah, and you take it at face value. But it's easy for us to say that, Gen Z can or can't handle something when you guys are going through quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the system isn't normal, as you say.
The system isn't normal. And even in instances where the system is normal and working as it's supposed to work, our generation kind of questions, well, is that right? Is that what it's supposed to be doing? Is that how the system should be working? So I think that's something that we kind of...
In March, we had President Michael Roth and UHart professor Bilal Sekou, who's going to join us later on in the show, who... talked about how colleges and universities were once at the forefront of political protests, but institutions more cautious today. Maybe they're more neutral. Hundreds of students were targeted by student government administration from 2020 through 2024 for their free speech. How should institutions respond when, that was at least according to one study, how should institutions respond when student activism directly challenges their authority or legitimacy?
Well, sometimes I find it interesting when administration feels targeted by certain callouts, when students are discussing their frustrations with bureaucracy and their frustrations with corrupt systems. I find it interesting when administration self-identifies and takes offense to kind of things that might not have even had them in the conversation when we're talking for the world as a whole. And I think administrators as a whole at all universities and colleges need to have a reckoning of their responsibility to allow students to grow and to have a wider environment to explore and to protests. And we look at student protests throughout history, and the majority of student protests, in my opinion, have been kind of slated on the right side of history. And students are always at the forefront of questioning. We are at that unique time in life where we have the time to question and to learn and grow. And I think administrators need to take a step back and to realize that our questions are not directed at them oftentimes. They're directed at the world at large, and their biggest support that they can give is to help students navigate that and to just give the time to say, this is what we're going to let you explore. And if they agree, disagree, I don't think it's their place to enforce otherwise.
And with colleges being at the forefront of protests, that's pressure on you all to respond. So, I mean, it's kind of your job to respond when something happens.
Absolutely. And I think when you're working at 9 to 5, there's no room for, to go out and march at protests. That's why things are scheduled so in advance. But when you're a college student and there's kind of those gaps in time in your schedule, there's that privilege and that time to explore and to protest. And I think that's super unique. And we can't get rid of that. That's not something I think should be removed from the university environment, nor should it be something that we're striving towards.
So much of today's rhetoric and political rhetoric is heated and divisive. What can we do on campus to change that? Do we need to change it?
I think people sometimes get uncomfortable with the confrontation and feel discomfort when there is not just differences of opinion, but differences in values and differences in strongly held beliefs. And oftentimes that is seen as a personal attack, and it may not necessarily be. I think in discourse on college campus, I think of recent events in Gaza, recent events in the Middle East, and the conversations that were held around that and how that was approached peer-to-peer on campus, but also by administration in certain areas, just to college campuses at large, and the divisiveness around that and how it was kind of seen as like a negative thing to be divisive on, or like, we don't really need to have this kind of view, or you need to have this view or that view or what have you. And divisive discourse can be beneficial. Sometimes unless you're challenged on your belief and challenged in a way that really makes you sit and think about it and makes you confront yourself in that way, there is really no room for you to grow and for you to develop your own opinions or develop or deepen your ideas. I think if you're in a position where if someone engages in discourse with you and it becomes divisive and you don't know where else to go from that, you don't have anything else to say to kind of support your backing or support your view. And that's not saying like personal attacks is a good thing, obviously. But you can't, you no longer can support your opinion, then I think there needs to be some kind of discussion with yourself about why you hold certain beliefs or where those beliefs are coming from or what you're doing to support that idea.
Last question for you guys. In terms of shaping policy, what real power do young people have right now? Not just in theory, but in practice. Like, do you both have any experience doing this, sort of wielding your power, or at least being able to access it, to have agency?
Absolutely. I think young people, to some extent, the messaging has always been that young people are the leaders of tomorrow. I think that's wrong. We're the leaders of today. Ooh. And there's so much strength in regaining that and recognizing that everyone in the world right now wants our attention, and that attention is valuable currency. And if we choose to spend it wisely, I think there's so much power that can be done. It makes me think of the quote by Tip O'Neill, all politics is local. Getting involved on the local level, whether that's through town councils, the municipal level, the state level, I think that's so important. Being engaged like that can make a world of a difference. I don't think we can save the world, change the world at large. But I do think that as long as we all focus on changing where we are and saving our own communities and working towards that it'll add up to something greater. It's not a sum of our individual actions, but a sum of what we can all work towards.
Yeah. I think, again, on a local level, a lot more of the changes that we do there and a lot more of the work we do there is directly influencing you and directly impacting what you do day to day. And I think as a generation, we kind of get lost in the grandness of it all and the largeness of the world, and forget about school board elections, forget about local politics and town halls and things like that. And we tend to also forget that we do vote with our wallets and we vote with our attention and our currency and our the things that we give value to. And a lot of times, especially in a system like we have today with the two-party system, the the things that you support as a whole, the things that you value, if you can sit there and change that locally, it will eventually impact a larger group. And I think especially like a city like Hartford, like large major cities where there are large groups of young people, there's a lot more change that can be done. And you see that in New York with the election of Zohran Mamdani, the concerns that our generation have, the conversations of people saying, well, the young people are they're too idealistic. They don't know what they're doing. They've never had a job before. And the concerns that young folks have, and it's like, this is our life, this is what's happening now. And again, we're not the leaders of tomorrow. We need to be worried about tomorrow, but we can't worry about tomorrow if we're not focusing on today.
Yeah. And if I can just jump in and say, I would say that people across Connecticut, especially people our age, are leading the charge. Mm-hmm. I knew people my age in high school who ran for boards of education, boards of zoning. I know people who are involved on our college campus with organizing. I'm personally involved with a local election. So I think that leveling the critique that young people are not engaged, I don't think is true. We are engaged in different ways. Mm-hmm. And there are young people that are getting involved on the local level. Students that are coming to testify at the CGA on bills that they're a fan of. And I think obviously we'd love to see more of that, but I do think that we're doing our best.
It sounds like more people in Connecticut are getting involved that are in Gen Z and actually running for office. And we're going to talk about that next with Jonathan Wharton and Bilal Sekou. But before we go there, Merci Payadue, a student at the University of Hartford. Merci, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us, Farah Suede, also a student at UHart. Farah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Congratulations on all your success. Congratulations on graduating. We're looking forward to what you guys do in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
After the break, we're going to talk to Jonathan and Bilal, as I mentioned. Hit us up if you want to talk to us. 888-720-9677. 888-720-9677. But first, we are in our spring fund drive at Connecticut Public. Believe it or not, donating to Connecticut Public and public media, it's a form of civic engagement, folks. And because of you this spring, much like the grass in the ground, public media is thriving. We still need your help, though. A couple of friends of mine will tell you why.
Thank you for listening to my friend Frankie Graziano's Wheelhouse. I got some goosebumps listening to Merci and Farah from the University of Hartford. Now, Frankie's put the mic in front of U.S. senators, but he also knows the pulse of our political environment, and that includes our most important demographic, young people, students. And to listen to shows like Frankie's Deep Dives in Politics or our daily news segments, we rely on our partnership with you. And today, it's the first day of our Spring Pledge Drive. I'm Sujata Srinivasan, your health reporter, and it's my pleasure to be here today with Jim Haddadine. He's editor and he leads our investigative unit. Now, Jim is a familiar voice to you, a familiar presence to you on the web. Stories like he's done deep dives like Hartford's police union fighting to limit the power of civilian oversight, and how people in Connecticut prisons are stuck in a backlog for specialty care. Now, these are the stories that you support. We rely on your partnership, you being our supporter. And the fastest and easiest way to donate is to go to ctpublic.org.
Hi, good morning, Sujata. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be with our listeners this morning and to be listening to this brilliant set of speakers talk about what Gen Z is facing on the Wheelhouse and their perspective from here at a Connecticut University and how that's playing out. And as Sujata mentioned, those types of conversations, those stories are made possible by our listeners who, value this work and value hearing those conversations on our air. And this is your moment to step up and join us and become one of those Connecticut Public supporters. If you can, please consider giving us a donation at ctpublic.org. It's the fastest, easiest way to get it done. Just take a look for the donate button. Or if you prefer, you can give us a call at 1-800-584-2788. Our goal this morning, 5 donations, $500, and we're getting there. We're on our way there. We've got 2 already. We need 3 more to hit our goal. Please help us be those next 3 people. And I do want to say thank you so much to those who have stepped up this hour. Janice from Glastonbury, Lee from Chester, thank you so much. And I wanted to shout out Kelly, Kelly from Oakdale. This is a comment that warmed my heart. I've been a daily listener for over 25 years. Donating is the least I can do to say thanks.
Yeah, and to Victoria Pickering from Stores Mansfield. She's been listening to us for years, and it's a very part of her living to listen to us. And we have a friend from Litchfield, so thank you. We've started strong, and we'd like you to keep it strong. Donate ctpublic.org.
And thank you so much.
This is the Wheelhouse from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Frankie Graziano. Phenomenal conversation we just had with two college students earlier in the hour. We heard them talk about where the magic happens, so to speak, with campus political discourse. Now let's talk to two of our Wheelhouse regulars, a couple of professors that talk to poli-sci students about this kind of thing. Bilal Sekou, the associate professor of politics and government at the University of Hartford.
Go Hawks.
Jonathan Wharton, an associate professor of political science and urban affairs at Southern Connecticut State University.
Go Owls.
Running out of time in the show. Be brief if you're going to call in. 888-720-9677. 888-720-9677. Bilal, we talked to these students. They're from your university. What's your reaction to what they were saying? Does this match what you kind of see at your class at UHart?
First of all, let me take my hat off to both of them. I was nowhere near that articulate at that age, and so I was really impressed with that conversation and the way in which they, the insights they offered about, discussions they have with, with other students, and also the way they define their generation. And I think in many ways they do represent what I think is among the best that we see in the classroom. And so I'm always amazed that, whenever we dive into some of these issues that are, in the news right now, just how much the students are able to contribute. Not all of them are willing to talk all the time, but the ones who do, it's just an amazing conversation whenever I'm in the classroom.
Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I share Bilal's sentiments. I think that, in fact, I'm sure Bilal will say the same thing. They sounded more like academics than even faculty professorial like. Makes me wonder if they're going to even venture into academia. Down the road. There's always interest, as you know, about too much about public service and public office, but why not, considering their angles and perspectives, consider the classroom themselves down the road? One never knows. But to get more specific, I was kind of struck by their interest in and concerns surrounding higher education administration and the things and pathways in which they could address some of the problems that persist on campus, not just the University of Hartford, but beyond. So they're questioning, in many ways, truth to power is one of them said, the whole idea of reckoning and having a call to question about the purpose of academia and administration is critical and quite frankly needed. Of course, you're talking to Bilal and I who are professors, so we'll have our own sentiments on that.
Yeah.
The institutional neutrality conversation is what we're kind of talking about.
What was particularly interesting to me, obviously every generation has their set of issues that they have to deal with while they're students. I mean, for me, I came into sort of student activism around the anti-apartheid movement And, also I was close enough to what had occurred with the era in which Black Studies was created and a lot of activism around hiring more faculty of color. And so in many ways, my own sort of political growth and understanding of the world of politics happened during that period. I mean, I cast my first vote for Jesse Jackson when he ran for president. And so, in that sense, I think, this generation is being shaped by its own set of issues with regard to, and what was particularly amazing about the conversation was just how much they're on top of those sort of issues. I don't know that I would have been able to have that conversation about the administration and neutrality and other things at that age, but again, all the more amazing. But these are extraordinary students also. I mean, involved in student government, running a political campaign. I mean, these are just not
Since
things I would
freshman
have been
and sophomore
doing.
year.
Exactly.
They're top notch, and they're getting involved. The students mentioned that young people can vote, give testimony to a committee, obviously. We've seen more Gen Zers run for office. I'm going to point this to Jonathan. According to Future Caucus, a bipartisan nonprofit, 1 in 4 candidates in 2024 was either a millennial or a Gen Zer. That same year, Connecticut saw 21 members sworn in who were under 35. Jonathan, break that down for us. Why is this important to talk about?
Well, it's critical because, as both the student leaders offered, this is important, especially at the state and local level. Candidates need to begin somewhere, and that's a great place to begin. And so to see that interest at least start up is essential. And I also speak towards the fact that it is no secret, Frankie, you speak about this frequently on your show. There are not enough candidates running for even the General Assembly. And having young people that fill that gap, that void, is really, really important for both generations X and, generations Y and Z.
Because running unopposed, it could be problematic. If there are not people to challenge people, there's not necessarily a term limit in place or something like that. If there's nobody running, then the person that is currently in office runs unopposed.
Or they remain in office for decades. We have far too many lawmakers where that is the case. Of course, I'm coming from New Haven, so I don't need to tell you about that.
Earlier, Farah talked about young people not getting enough credit surrounding their political participation. Future Caucus also reported that these younger candidates were disproportionately eliminated from the races. Why do you think that is, and what are the effects when that happens, guys?
One thing I will say,
money?
One thing I will say that I thought was really important is I think that, at least for my generation, and I'm Gen X, for a lot of us, the sort of traditional ways in which we become involved in the political system is the way we sort of look to young people and expect them to also be involved. But what I was struck about in the conversation is that they're engaging in society in ways that are quite different and making tremendous contributions that are often overlooked because we have this particular lens that we use to look at politics and political engagement. And so a lot of the stuff they're doing on the internet, for example, a lot of the sort of organizing the sort of causes that they work on. I mean, they're engaged in ways that we just don't always measure. And I just wanted to quickly, agree with, John, and I'm a big proponent of term limits. I think that people stay far too long, that the political system needs to incentivize people to leave, and I think it will open up and create opportunities. I will say, as a member of the Gen X community, I'm a little saddened by the fact that we've been skipped over, and now we're talking about millennials and Z and everybody else.
Yeah, you're out of there.
And so, I figure I won't get my chance.
Yeah. Well,
we just don't have the numbers, Bilal. You know that. The millennials win. People
we need
Exactly.
more. We need more people of a certain age to run.
Yeah,
Bilal. That's what we're talking about. In
we
America.
lost our chance, Jonathan.
We want more Gen Xers. We want more people that are cuspers.
So we sit next to this millennial right here.
He's running things. We know that, Bilal.
Exactly.
Oh, for a second, Farah told me earlier that she wants my seat, so I'll be seeing
Better
you guys.
beware.
I'll be seeing you guys maybe in Cabo one of these days, as Farah Suede is going to take over, and she should. She was terrific, and Merci as well was.
Yeah.
She'll be looking for work soon, so please give these folks a call, and potentially you could hire them. Any advice for those students, maybe not just on getting employment, but for students that want to meaningfully engage with their peers?
Yeah. Well, I'll go first real quickly. They're already doing that. I mean, I think the two of them coming and being on this show and having this opportunity, speaking so
It's phenomenal.
It's just an amazing thing. And again, I keep coming back to it's not something I'm confident that I would have been able to do at that age. And so clearly they're on a path or a trajectory, towards success. I share Jonathan's idea that these are potential grad students, and maybe PhDs and professors in the future.
Other students not in the poli-sci program, because I think they made that distinction. It's like, hey, we're involved, we're engaged, we're having these conversations. What about people that are sort of outside that bubble at UHart or Southern Connecticut State, wherever?
Oh, I see a lot of that firsthand, because obviously it's no secret I've been chairing the sociology department, and obviously you had a sociology major there from UHart, Bilal College there, but I see that where in many spaces and majors they don't want to necessarily go directly to public office, but maybe they want to make an impact at the government level. Through agencies that they can work with, or NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and certainly nonprofits. So there is that interest, that zeal that they want to go out there and demonstrate their chops. But I will say, to your point, Frankie, it's going to require a lot more. We need more people to step up in a variety of different capacities. We need a lot more people to recognize that, what exists at the community level is just as fundamental as it is at the national and international levels too. So I don't know whether that is a pathway to address maybe more the education dynamics in the classroom in terms of what's being taught maybe in high school, for example, before they get to college, or maybe a consideration of emphasizing that, look, these spaces and places exist in the media market, in the media places, exist in social media. It's everywhere. So how do we get that out there?
Bilal, last question. I'm going to give it to you. I want you to do this as quick as you can. Last time you were on here with Jonathan and we talked to students, we talked about having students listen to one another, and there was some great advice you gave in that show. Help us understand how you can push in class to make these kids debate each other, but do it respectfully.
Yeah, and I think, ultimately I can't put my thumb on the scale as a professor, so I have to be neutral. But what I try to do is I try to create the space and create that opportunity for students to, engage in that conversation. I think some of it really depends on the kind of questions you ask and the way in which you invite. But I think it is a process. It's something we build over time. You can't walk into day one and think you're going to get that. But I think as the students become more confident, that you allow them to say things, that you don't, ridicule them, that you don't make fun of them, that you don't sort of, push back at them really hard, but to really challenge them to think critically and to really be able to provide some justification and explanation for the things for the points they're making. And I think you create that space, and over time they become comfortable with it.
It looks like you guys are doing well at the University of Hartford when we get to meet those students in Merci and Farah. They did a phenomenal job today.
And I'm sure Jonathan's doing a great job.
Of course he is, Jonathan. We didn't forget about you.
They're teaching me. That's the beauty of this generation. They're teaching me. I mean, I'm teaching identity politics this semester, and I had it last night. They're always reframing and offering new perspectives. That's the beauty of being in a classroom.
That's Jonathan Wharton, Associate Professor of Political Science and Urban Affairs at Southern Connecticut State University. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Jonathan.
Thank you. Appreciate
I can't wait to see you in person again soon.
Same
Bilal, Associate Professor of Politics and Government at the University of Hartford, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for helping us out with this conversation. It was great to have these guys on the show. It's been even better to work with a friend of mine, hopefully a long-term friend. She's another student at the University of Hartford. Tale Ricketson, this was her last show helping us out here. She's been helping while Chloe Wynn's been away. Chloe Wynn's coming back soon, so I just wanted to formally say thank you so much to Tale, one of Bilal's students. He helped to connect us to Tale. There you see her on her screen. And happy birthday to Tale as well. Thank you so much, Tale, for everything you've done. We love you. We appreciate you. And good luck at your lacrosse game. What a talented person. All the things going on. Show's edited by Patrick Scahill. Dylan Reyes, a technical producer. Special thanks to Tess Terrible, Megan Fitzgerald, Connecticut Public's visuals team. Download the Wheelhouse anytime on your favorite podcast app. I'm Frankie Graziano. This is the Wheelhouse. Our show is over, but we do have one more opportunity for you to show some support to Connecticut Public this hour. Here are two of my colleagues with more information on how you all can donate now.